I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The board will now adjourn into executive session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Texas Government Code, Section 551.074, to discuss personnel or to hear complaints against personnel, and the time is 5:30. The board will now reconvene into open session. The time is 5:59. Item 4, matters from executive session. A, personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments pursuant to Government Code Section 551.074. 1, possible action regarding routine personnel including but not limited to administrative appointments. Item A, Executive Director of External Relations. Do I have a motion to approve as discussed in executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Dr. Micah, item 2, introductions.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce the new Executive Director of External Relations, Ms. Deb Caldwell. Congratulations, Deb. That concludes my introductions for this evening.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Congratulations, Ms. Caldwell. Item 5, presentation A, Bexar County School Boards Coalition update. Dr. Micah.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my pleasure to ask, he's already here, Mr. Bobby Blunt from Northside ISD to present on this. Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight, Bobby.
Good. Thanks for having me again. Pleasure to see everybody. Just wanted to give you all quickly an update on the Bexar County School Board Coalition, just a quick mire of the background for those that may not know, as well as our exciting, well, I won't spoil that special for you yet. But again, the Bexar County School Board Coalition was started in 2005, and it is a nonprofit organization. It is incorporated within the state of Texas, and the membership are only board of trustee members. So it includes the 20 independent school districts that are partially or wholly within within Bexar County. So each one of you, years ago, we had the opportunity for all board members to come, and that is always there, and it's always engaging, and a lot of good activities that we have ongoing. Some of the latest things that we have been doing the last year, I think you all know we've been very, very active in terms of with school reopening, in terms of really representing the state of Texas. We are seen as a leader, as a region of the state of Texas, as we can get our boards to sort of collaborate. And we did advocate things for the governor. We had some meetings with Dr. Wu when it came down to some mental health issues, et cetera. So whenever there's something that needs to be done from an overall vantage point that would involve us all working together, that's where the Bexar County School Board Coalition comes in. The coalition is also officially Go Public campaign. I know everybody knows about our Go Public campaign that with the superintendents and the trustees, our communications, and all of our districts are heavily involved with. Officially, it falls under the Bexar County School Board Coalition. So it is a campaign within that, and many are not aware of that part of it also. I do want to thank your superintendent and also Trustee Sandy. They've been very involved with the Go Public campaign. And one thing I want to let you know, and it's something that we really worked hard on this last couple of months, is the Go Public campaign. We really have pushed to say we really need to make sure that we really stay focused within the San Antonio area, and that we're advocating and more engaged. There's some opportunities to make it much bigger, but we really had that particular focus, and thanks to you all's members here that help with that. And by the way, I should also mention that Sandy's been with the coalition itself from the very beginning, and she's our current treasurer. But the big announcement I want to make for everybody now is we are releasing book number 2. We wrote a book about 10 years ago when there was a lot of misinformation coming out. That was a factual guide. This one is meant to be more of a informative type guide. It talks about a lot of our different school districts, what we have to offer, the programs we have to offer. Gives the data background from a whole region type standpoint. So if you want to see what's going on within the area. Because it did take a 2-year effort, we were caught up like everybody else in the middle of the pandemic, but it talks about the first 60 days to really lay out what was done, what was accomplished, and try to document so everybody understands the food service and the other activities that we had to do. And then it talks about also the history of the Go Public campaign itself, as well as the current status of it. So it is on sale for $25. I'm not sure if we're allowed to do that part of this. But I wanted to get that out there too, and it's on Barnes & Noble, it's on Amazon, or you can get it from us directly. So I want to pass that on and appreciate the time to give everybody an update on our coalition and our latest adventure.
Thank you, Bobby.
Just kind of fan through it and show them how pretty it is.
Oh, the cover itself? Let's see which way you're going. See, there's our...
Really beautiful.
There's our cover. It is, like I said, it's meant to be more of a marketing effort, my way of saying it. So it's a very colorful book, too. Barnes & Noble, Amazon. No.
$20 right here.
And thank-
The secretary treasurer, so, I'll take money.
So thank you all again.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye now.
All right. Item 6, new business for possible board action. A, business services. 1, possible action regarding notice of public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rate. Mr. Villarreal.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. First, we bring an action item to get approval for a notice of public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rate. We do this every year. We're hoping to publish on June 12th, and it's with a budget adoption for June 24th.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this? Do I have a motion to approve publication of the notice of public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rates in accordance with Texas Education Code, Section 44.004, setting the public meeting date as June 24, 2021?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leos. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. Item 7, presentation A, budget study session number 1. Mr. Villarreal.
Yes, Madam President, as Brian Moy and Susie Lackhorn come to the podium. Yeah, I might as well go there. Yeah, I just wanted to set this up. It's our first budget study session, number
I'm like,
one.
you always are in the back, though.
No, I was, well, he was telling me to come over here, and I was getting confused. I am.
It's good to see you up close.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's been tough back there. Yeah, I mean, I'm always riveted back there, though, so I'm paying attention.
Sorry, I distracted you. I
Sorry.
apologize.
Tonight's agenda is it's our budget study session schedule, budget adoption rules. Tonight we're going to talk about our general fund revenue basics, property values, state funding, and our 2021 revenue update. We'll do a little bit of benchmarking. We'll discuss the debt service fund and the school nutrition services fund. The schedule today, like I said, we're discussing those topics. On Monday, June 7th, will be our second budget study session. We're going to do legislative update, campus staffing, additional allocation request, health insurance, and compensation discussion. Monday, June 21st, we'll do final updates, additional compensation discussion, and detailed budget view. And hopefully adoption on Thursday, June 24th, tax rate, the general fund, school nutrition fund, and debt service fund. We'll discuss tax rates. And the budget adoption rules, the district budget must be adopted by June 30th. The board must adopt budgets for the general fund, debt service fund, and school nutrition services fund. The budget adoption must include a public meeting and notice, which you have approved today, must be published on the district's website and in a local newspaper at least 10 days, but no more than 30 days prior to the meeting. And like I stated, it's going to come out June 12th. We do not adopt the tax rate at the same meeting as the budget. That will happen in August or September after the district receives a certified appraisal value from the Bear Appraisal District. TA also calculates what our maximum compressed tax rate will be, and then TA sends a notice to us certifying the district has completed certain Chapter 49 filings. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Moy, our Executive Director of Finance and Accounting.
Thank you, Dan. Madam President, board members, Dr. Micah, executive staff, guests. We're going to start off discussing what is the obviously single biggest revenue source for the district, which is property tax revenue. Preliminary values that we've received from Bear Appraisal District are showing a value growth on appraised value of just over $2 billion, or about 4%. Of that, about $633 million is new construction, and $1.4 billion is growth of value on existing properties. So you remember that HB 3, when it came out in 2019, included provisions to keep property tax growth for school districts to no more than 2.5% per year. So we started doing property tax compression annually. Before, you had seen property tax compression in '05 through '07, and there was mandated amounts, mandated number of pennies. Same thing happened in 2019, where they forced us down to 97 cents. But then starting in 2020 and moving forward, we don't know what that compressed rate is going to be until TEA analyzes data that we provide them from the appraisal district. This here is my best estimate at this point. So let's just go through all of this. So we're 4% increase in appraised value, but only drops slightly to only a 3.8% increase in taxable value. And that number that I have highlighted, that is the basis of what TEA will use to calculate the base rate. To that base rate, we add the 5 pennies that you approved for above compressed, that we get our Tier 2 state funding matching funds on. Then from that taxable value, you take away frozen values. These are all the properties of those that are 65 and older. So as soon as you become 65, you get an extra $23,000 property tax exemption, and whatever your new calculated taxes are, those are your taxes forever. So you end up with a taxable value increase of only $1 billion compared to it's $1 billion. That's a big number. But compared to the increase in the appraised value, it's 2.7%, where the appraised value started out at 4%. So I'm computing that we would have a new tax rate of 95.41 cents, so almost a full penny drop. And then that would result in total M&O taxes of about $426.2 million, about a $9.3 million increase over this year, or about 2.2%. And like I said, this is very preliminary, and we are awaiting July 25th certified appraised values from Bear Appraisal District. And even after July 25th, property values still change. Our certified number only has to be for the appraisal district. It can either be 95% certified or 90% certified with a certified estimate for 10%. Those are the rules the appraisal district works on. So throughout the year, we are constantly getting adjustments to property values. And let me tell you, those adjustments are always lower. Exemptions that weren't processed get processed. Lawsuits that are ongoing, that didn't make it through the regular protest window, continually bring down property values. So these estimates that are here are based on historical trends of how our appraisal roll changes from April through July through the following June, end of our fiscal year. How will COVID affect these values? Property values are based on their value as of January 1 of each year. As of January 1, 2020, there was not a pandemic in Bexar County. The businesses did not start to be affected until March, when we started shutting things down. So January 1, 2021 will be the first reappraisal that could include the impact of the pandemic on commercial values. And we just don't know what that is. We have never reappraised, or the appraisal district has never reappraised property after a pandemic. And then you're saying, well, everything's opening back up again. Shouldn't that help? It wasn't reopened on January 1, 2021. That is what it is based on. Now, the pandemic is not likely to affect home values. The housing market in San Antonio, really across the country, is extremely strong. home prices continue to rise simply because demand is outpacing supply. Before homeowners filed their protests, single-family housing rose 7.8%. 7.2% was the value of their existing homes, and we had about 0.6% of the increase is related to new home construction. Since single-family housing is 59% of our total appraised value, let's say that 7.8% increase after protests goes down to 7%. So we lose 0.8%. A 7% increase in the value of single-family housing would assure us a 4% increase to total values because single-family housing makes up such a large share of our property. The changes to commercial property are not as easy to predict. So the numbers that I showed you in terms of how much tax revenue we're going to get did not attempt for me to even make a guess. I just simply used historical trends of protest losses. So before protest adjustments, commercial property rose 3.2%, a 1.1% increase in existing values. So you can see by that, if it only went up 1%, the appraisal district was already trying to factor in some losses on some properties, especially like in the hospitality industry. Typically, commercial values drop anywhere from 2.5% to 4.5% during the protest process. And this commercial property makes up about 24% of our total appraised values. The appraisal district won't have gone through all and processed all of the protests and entered the results of those protests into their software until pretty close to the second week of June. So I won't have an update for you on property values and its effect to revenue until budget study session number 3. So just as a reminder to you all, and also because I'm required to tell you this under the financial integrity rating system for Texas Schools First, I have to show the effect of the inverse relationship of property value to state revenue. So we showed that there would be an increase of the tax levy of about $9.3 million. That is not an increase to overall revenue of $9.3 million. Because the state funding formula is tied to property values, any increase in local revenue due to property value increasing is offset by lower state aid. State aid will decrease by about $9.3 million to offset the increase in property values. It's basically just a shift from state share to local share of the burden of Tier 1 of the funding formula. Tier 1 is all the student-based formula that says this is how much the district should have to operate. After you get that number, you say, okay, this much is the state share, this much is the local share based on value. HB3 limited property tax revenue to 2.5% growth, not total revenue. So yes, property tax revenue will be growing, but state aid will be going down. District revenues for M&O remain flat. HB3 accomplished no revenue growth for M&O for school districts. So just a reminder, like I said, single-family homes, about 59%, commercial 24%, multifamily residential with 10%, and then all other categories make up 7%. The good news is having 59% single-family housing is that it provides us some stability. We are not a school district that will go into crisis mode because the Exxon plant shut down. We have the relative stability of having mostly single-family homes. In fact, our 10 largest taxpayers don't even make up 5% of our total value. So any one company or industry that might have some sort of out of business shutdown does not significantly affect our property values. So you see your appraisal come in and you compare it to what they appraised your house at last year, and you're like, man, that's a big jump. But it doesn't all come to the school district. Let's look at the history of market value of your property, taxable value of your property, and how much M&O revenue the school district levy, or of the levy we get as revenue. The orange line is market value. The blue line is taxable value. And the M&O levy, which uses the axis on the right as a guide, is in green. So the dip in the tax levy from 07-08 is, 07 and 08, that was when the state did the compression from $1.50 down to $1. Then the next time you see a big divergence between market and taxable is in 15-16, when the state increased the homestead exemption from $15,000 to $25,000. Before that, there was a pretty consistent gap between market value and taxable value of about $3 billion. After the increase in homestead exemption, that gap widened to about $4.3 billion. And that gap is now continued to grow, and it is the gap between the orange line and the blue line is now close to $7 billion. So in the past 15 years, the market value has grown by 136%, but our M&O levy has only grown by 44%. What is causing the change in that gap? Two things that I want to point out that are making a significant impact. First is the number of homesteads that are owned by people over 65. As you know, as I said, once you get to over 65, you're frozen. 15 years ago, 27% of our homesteads were owned by 65 or over. That is now, for this year that we're currently in, up to 40%, and it looks like for this upcoming tax year, it's going to be closer to 42%. And in 2009, the legislature made homesteads that are owned by those veterans that are certified as 100% disabled, 100% exempt. That's even a more significant impact than saying your taxes are frozen. This says you pay no taxes. And it took a while for the veterans to kind of pick up, oh, this is out there. But now we have about $1 billion of homes that qualify for a 100% exemption. Now, because the split in M&O revenue between state share and local share is based on taxable value, obviously the state will have to kick in, funds for the fact that we're not taxing on that billion of property. It does, however, affect us in terms of our debt service, our INS side. But as we get to that section of the presentation, you'll see we're still in really good shape there.
And Brian, just real quick, I just want to make a point. He was talking about protest values and things of that type, exemptions. So as the local value goes down, the state should pony up the difference. And we do go year in and year out, we do go and protest with the state that we were shorted some dollars on the local effort, so they owe us money on the state. So that's something that's ongoing, and we do get, and we brought some budget amendments to show some of that revenue in the past. I just want to, because it takes maybe 3, 4, 5 years for us to be able to go back and protest those values, and it's always a negotiation, and we use Dr. Cavusi and Brian and the team. We look at it to try to make sure that they give us every dollar that we're supposed to get.
Correct. So remember, I said that what the funding formula is set on is those July 25th values, but we lose easily $600 million worth of value every year from that July date to the following June. And we have to work to say, you need to fund us on what we actually, on the property value that is associated with the actual taxes we brought in, not with the number that it was last July. So that's what we do every year. All right, let's move into a little bit of state funding. We're not going to get too much into the weeds on the funding formulas themselves, but I wanted to give you an update on what's happening this year. I know we've come to you earlier and been talking about the different ways TEA was looking at doing hold harmless. Initially, hold harmless was only supposed to be for the first semester of this year. It was later extended to cover the second semester if the district maintained at least 52% in-person enrollment over the final 6 weeks. We will accomplish that. So we will qualify for hold harmless funding for the second semester, the final 6 weeks. The trouble is, and we mentioned this briefly at an earlier presentation, is we don't agree with the way TEA is calculating hold harmless. Actually, we're fine with the way they calculate it. We don't like the databases that they're using. So it's based on a 3-year trend of attendance and FTE data of our students, 17, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20. Well, obviously, 17, 18, and 18, 19 are pre-House Bill 3, so those numbers are going to be much lower because this not including like the additional ADA that we get for dual language, both the LEP and non-LEP. It doesn't account for the changes that House Bill 3 made to career technical education, that our career tech FTEs went way up with HB 3. And then 1920, they're using projected numbers they had on hand in a state database last July. And I understand that they did it. They needed to give those districts that are August 31 year ends, they were trying to give them something to help them say, this is how much state revenue we're going to get when they were creating their budgets. Us with the June 30, we know we're never going to get the data in time. And so we actually appealed to TEA and spoke with the Deputy Commissioner of Finance and had gotten nowhere, saying, you have the data. Just swap out one set of data with another set of data and have it reflect reality. And we've gotten nowhere.
And we did send them a letter. We sent them emails, and initially we got a response saying they were looking at it, and since I think early April, we've heard nothing. So we're still trying.
That being said, the flawed hold harmless formula is still better than no hold harmless at all. As you know, we were over 3,000 children short of projection this year. I estimate that if they had based state revenue on the student counts that we actually had, our state revenue would be about $85 million. The state way of calculating hold harmless will get a state revenue of about $91.7 million. If they simply took out the 1920 projections and put in 1920 actual, I would estimate that our state revenue for 2021 would be closer to $98 million. So there's a good $6 million gap there that we're not going to see unless TEA changes their minds. And what's state revenue going to look like for next year? At this point, we don't know. We do know that they're saying we are going to fully fund House Bill 3. And we do not see major changes to the nitty-gritty details of the funding formula. But there are some significant unanswered questions even to this date. And mind you, the legislature, they're done next Monday. So will the state supplant the LEA share of ESSER 2? We don't know, but we have an idea of where they're leaning. Senate Bill 1, the state budget for the next 2 years, was referred to conference committee because there were differences in the House version and the Senate version. So you convene a conference committee and you work out the differences. They have reached agreement and worked out those differences, but until the Legislative Budget Board produces new documents based on those decisions, we can't see like where the line item that says, here's how much ESSER money we're going to supplant in the state budget for the next 2 years. We have to wait on the LBB to actually produce the documents. Simply saying, oh, we agree on the House on this clause and we agree with the Senate on this rider is not enough for us to be able to make that assessment. So there is a House Bill 3 cleanup bill with a change as massive as House Bill 3 was. You know that they missed a couple of dotting some I's and crossing some T's. So Dan Huberty worked to create a cleanup bill, but it is becoming a Christmas tree of here's what I want to change with anything funding related bill. And so right now, House Bill 1525, that cleanup bill, is with the Senate. So it passed the House, moved over to the Senate. It will maybe make it to the floor of the Senate tomorrow. Just earlier this afternoon, they released 89 pages of pre-filed amendments for when that bill gets discussed in the Senate. And Deb and I did not have time to go through 89 pages of amendments to see what might happen. But even then, these are just filed amendments. We have no idea which ones are going to get approved or not, or whether the amendments are going to get amended on the floor, or whether the House will agree to the amendments and they go back to conference committee on this bill. One thing that I do know is the state has been trying very hard to find a way to tell us that we have to put away into fund balance a good chunk of ESSER 3 money. If you remember, ESSER 3 was about $117.8 million. And one of the amendments that's in there actually states that we must put away 40% of the money to be used after September 30th, 2024, which is the end of the grant program period. We don't know how that's going to fly. But again, just a filed amendment. It is nowhere, yet near to become law. But just keep your eyes open in the next 6 days. We still don't know what the state is going to do with their share of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 dollars. Remember, the state got to retain 10% of the ESSER money for programs that they wanted to create. There were some amendments as part of those 89 pages to create a bunch of grant programs and outcomes-based bonuses. If you got certain children who were this far behind in grade level and got them to this level, you'll get an outcomes bonus. Again, all speculation right now. We still don't have a virtual learning bill. And finally, on us, a big portion of state funding is how many kids do we have, as we noted by the 2021 hold harmless. We don't know right now how many students will return. We have an estimate that we're using for staffing and budget purposes, and that is 61,586 students, which is a significant increase over this year, which is right around 60,500. And you can see though, that's still a significant reduction from our peak year in 13-14, where we had a little over 68,000 students. So students drive revenue, so we're on a wait and see. We're going to shift gears here to a little bit of benchmarking. How do we look compared to other districts in the county, and then some other districts that are near us but not necessarily in Bexar County? So forgive us for all these large numbers of amounts of numbers on this page. Susie and I just love numbers, and we stick them all over the place. Mm-hmm. Here's what I want to highlight, though. So the top is how much local maintenance and operations revenue per average daily attendance we get. So that's, basically property tax revenue per ADA. It's about $6,850. The state operating revenue per ADA is around $1,700. So we have total operating revenue a little over $8,500. Now let's look down that row that's next to the last column that says amount more or less than any ISD. So Edgewood, San Antonio, Southside, Somerset, they get significantly more on a per average daily attendance basis than Northeast. 30%, 28%, 25% more. We're pretty similar to, say, like a New Braunfels and a Northside, and we actually get a little bit more money than some of those other districts down there at the bottom. But this is per average daily attendance. You know, the state funding formulas are all based on weights. So if you have more children in more expensive instructional settings, or you have more economically disadvantaged students, you should be getting more money. So then let's look at this on a per weighted average daily attendance basis. So we're not looking at 25 to 30% differences for some of these districts now, but it's still significant, over $800 per student, 10 to 13% differences on a per weighted average daily attendance. So we know that the difference is not all based on student counts and student demographics. So why do these districts receive more M&O money per child, however we decide to define it, enrollment, ADA, weighted ADA? One reason, the tax rate. So all of these districts going from Edgewood to Harlandale were, prior to House Bill 3 compression, were at the max $1.17. Everyone remembers the highest tax rate you could be at was $1.17. Well, House Bill 3 moved that cap, so now they are at $683. So this whole, from now on, we should never ask another district, what's your tax rate? What's important is you ask them, how many pennies above compressed are you? So you can see that all those districts are at a little under 14 cents above compressed. What that means is they tax their homeowners 14 cents higher than we do. But if you're in a district where property values are so low, it does not make a big difference in the homeowner's property tax bill. But because those pennies are matched by the state at what, like, the 96th percentile richest district in the state can get, they get a ton of state matching funds. So that's what leads to being, you know, $800 more than us. You can see of Edgewood's total M&O revenue, 1,000 of it is simply because what they get in the revenue above compressed, not the first 100, not the first 90-something pennies, the last 14. And since we are a district that is not likely to go out for a TRE anytime soon, we just have to learn to work with what we have at this point. But it does make a difference. This is average teacher salary off the Tapper reports, and it breaks it down by experience bands. So for a beginning teacher, a teacher who has 1 to 5 years experience, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, and over 20. So again, a lot of districts pay more than us, some significantly so, some not so much. But again, this is too many numbers for you to try and do all of, whipping out your pencil and doing your calculations. So I'm just going to break it down to this.
I have a question.
Yes.
On your previous slide, does that include benefits or just the straight salary?
No, that is just straight salary, and it includes whatever experience differential that House Bill 3 required to do. We chose to do $600 additional salary once a teacher gets to be the 6 years of experience, and $1,200 additional salary once the teacher could be 16 years experience. All these districts could have come up with different ways of addressing that requirement of House Bill 3, but no matter what, it should all be in there in terms of the salary. But this does not include health, dental, none of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if you start to look at the comparisons by experience band, you'll see that on average, and I'm doing a weighted average, so tiny districts do not skew the results, as much. So if you had one district that only had 100 teachers and they were paying them all $70,000, it's not going to skew these numbers. So this is a weighted average based on size. So based on that, compared to that weighted average, we pay our beginning teachers about $2,400 less than that weighted average. In the 1 to 5 years, $1,300, 6 to 10, $1,600. But as you start to get more experience, you can see that the gap is shrinking. So the more experienced teachers, we're really competitive. And then if you address things like Ms. Williams, knowing what our health insurance is like, it's on the take-home basis, and Susie will go over all that on June 7th. We know that it's that on the far end of the scale that we're doing much better than we are at the beginning of the scale. So that's something that when we're talking about compensation at the next meeting is the discussion of how, what do we do to start to address the scale inequities, and we'll be working on that for the next 2 weeks, probably right up until 5:30 on June 7th. Okay, totally changing gears now. Let's talk about the second of the three fund types that you are required to adopt a budget for. That's the debt service fund. So a quirk for being a June 30 district, and we say this every year, is the budget that you adopt is for our fiscal year, July to June. The tax rate that you adopt in September must be adequate to pay debt service from September 1 to August 31. But don't worry, we've been doing this we've been June 30 district for how long now?
2005.
2005, 16 years. We've got this down, don't worry. So from July to June, our debt service requirements are just under $120 million, 117.5 on our regular general obligation bonds and our commercial paper, and just under $2 million in interest on our federally subsidized qualified school construction bonds. Those were bonds that were issued the last time we had federal stimulus in 2010, and they were supposed to be interest-free, but then the Great Recession hit, and the federal government said, well, we'll make them mostly interest-free. So now, on average, we pay about 6% of the interest, and the federal government pays 94% of the interest. So the tax rate to cover payments for September to August needs to cover $114.3 million. So for purpose of this presentation, we're going to get, as we get better property value data, we might come to you with a change. But for right now, the tax rate is assumed to be 30 cents, so that's a reduction of a half cent. You look like you have a question.
Yes. And the September to August, that coincides with the state's fiscal year, correct?
I believe so, yes, it does.
Okay. So that's
Right, so that's why most school districts, because they were under the state guidance, had the same fiscal year, but then they were given the option to change to June, and we just found that there were operationally there were advantages to being a June 30 year.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome. So at that 30-cent rate, we will have enough funds available August 1, 2022 to do a bond call or pay down debt early of approximately $22.7 million. That means on those bonds that we call, they are gone as of 8/1/2022. And over the next 25 years that those bonds would have been outstanding, we would have paid nearly $8 million of interest on those bonds. You want as much of your money, just like your mortgage, you want as much of your money to pay down principal. And that's what we've been doing since the short-term rates have gotten so low. And we've changed over our portfolio doing 1 to 5 year VRDO bonds, doing the commercial paper program. We have $76.5 million of commercial paper currently outstanding that is at a 0.11% interest. So we're taking these extra funds, and we're just going to keep knocking down principal so that future taxpayers aren't burdened with interest. So for this year, we're going to end the year with about 142 million of fund balance. Next year, revenue and expenditures, both roughly 137 million. Other sources and uses, that's just the crazy way that governmental accounting makes you record things when you do a refunding bond like we're going to do this upcoming June. The money coming in from the new bondholders is another source. The money going out to pay off the old bondholders is another use. So you can see we're doing a much smaller refunding issue this year than we did the current year. So we'll end the year with about $145 million of fund balance. And you're like, Brian, that's more fund balance that's in the general fund. Why is fund balance so large when the debt service fund is like 1/4 the size of the general fund? Easy. We've got to make the money stretch. Again, we have to have enough money to cover the following August. So in that fund balance, we keep setting aside money to pay off the principal of those qualified school construction bonds that come due August 1, 2027. So we are slowly just, adding money to that account so that when we get to August 1, 2027, we're not looking around saying, who's got the checkbook? The money will be there. Again, we're going to pay off $22.7 million in principal early. And we need to cover that August 1 debt service payment of the following year, which we think right now is going to be around $56.5 million. So really net, we have about $45 million in fund balance, which is, enough to pay for almost an entire year's worth of interest. So if things go bad, we won't have to hurry to restructure everything in order to make our debt payments. We will have the funds available. And with that, I am going to let you stop hearing me talk, and I want to move the presentation over to Susie Lackhorn to go over school nutrition services.
Brian, real quick. I think it was a few months ago. I'm trying to recall the date. We brought you the savings that we've seen through our, we're aggressive, but we're safe as far as our refunding of bonds. So I know on the June 7th, I can bring you what we've saved over the course of the last 10 years doing the VRDOs and refunding. I'm trying to remember, it was 6 months ago or 8 months ago, but we'll give you that number. But I just wanted to say that because, we have been aggressive and we have saved taxpayers quite a bit of money for future interest payments and by paying principal off early. So we can get you that number.
All right.
Sorry.
No problem. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests. I'm very excited, as always, to talk about my favorite budget topic, school nutrition services. Isn't it fun? So it's always nice to have such a great and positive program to talk about. Before I get into numbers, I want to talk a little bit about our operations. So as Mr. Moy and I have lamented many times, not even the things that are always easy, those things aren't easy anymore. So things are a little bit more complex in school nutrition, but it still looks great. So normally, during a regular school year, we would operate under the National School Lunch and Breakfast programs. And then when school was out, we'd switch to a summer feeding program. You couldn't use summer feeding programs during the school year. That was a requirement. It had to be outside your calendar. Then a pandemic hit, and everything changed. And so in March of 2020, we had to pivot very quickly to be able to feed those students who were now stuck at home and not coming to school to get access to meals. And the requirement that the summer feeding program not happen during your school calendar was lifted. So we switched to a summer feeding program. And there are a couple of programs, we'll talk about it a little bit more later on. And so for that rest of that school year and all of 2021, we were able to use the summer feeding program to feed our kids for free. And we recently found out that they're going to extend that to next year. So 21, 22, we're also going to be able to feed all the students for free by leveraging that program instead of the normal program, the National School Lunch Program. So, great news for our families and our kids. So we're very excited to be able to do that. And once you see the numbers, I think you'll be excited too. So let's take a look at revenue. Wow, these numbers look very strange compared to anything you've ever seen before. So normally, we run about mid-30s to high 30s, 30 million for revenue and expenditures in school nutrition. 2021 is at 22 million. And 21-22, we're projecting at 42 million. A very large increase, a very big change. And normally, when we're operating under the National School Lunch Program, local share of the revenue runs 30 to 35%. And you can see here that it's very tiny. And that's because we're operating under a summer feeding program where the kids are eating for free. So we're not collecting payments for meals from our kids. We are collecting payments for adults and other items, but you can see the bulk of all of our funding is coming from the federal source. And so normally that runs only 60 to 70%. But next year we're going to get to leverage the same kind of access to federal funds and get to the benefits to our kids. Now, why are we growing by nearly $20 million in revenue? Well, very obviously the answer is we're going to have more students. So we're expecting an increase in enrollment. Mr. Moy showed you that number earlier. And we expect more students to return from remote learning back to in-person. So we'll have more kids on campus, and that will just increase the number of meals we provide, increase our reimbursements from the feds for that. We're also moving to the seamless summer option summer feeding program, very similar to what we had been doing, which was the summer food service program, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility, but we still get to feed students for free. I'm only going to say we're going to feed students for free about 30 times in these handful of slides, so I apologize, but it's a very important part. Despite the fact that we don't have to have qualifications for the students to eat for free, we're still going to need to collect data to identify economically disadvantaged students for our Title I and compensatory education programs. So that'll be really important. And like our meals, our snack program, our after-school meals and snacks will also be free. So this will be great news for our KIN program and tutoring. Adult prices will also have to more than likely increase in January 22. This is kind of a strange thing when you see sometimes how much money we make and we're told we have to increase prices. I'll talk a little bit more when we get to all the prices, but that's another reason why revenue will go up a little bit. And we are anticipating a check from the feds for the stimulus package of about $750,000. So we're anticipating it later in the summer, but you never know. It could come in early, and if so, we'll have to adjust things. But we really do anticipate it July-ish, I think. So, all right, so let's look at meal prices. 0, obviously, because we won't be charging the students. But adults, we're about $4.50 for lunch and $2.65 for breakfast. The feds require that we set the prices we charge based off of their reimbursement rates. And so they won't let us go lower than a particular number. So they set the minimum for us. And the summer feeding prices run January to December. So we had to change the adult meal prices based off of those reimbursement rates earlier this year. And so we're going to start the school year at these prices, but it's very likely that in January we'll have to increase rates based off of that requirement. All right, so now expenditures. Just as crazy as revenue was, expenditures are also crazy, but not quite as crazy. So we're projecting for 2021 to have about $24 million in costs, and then for 21-22, this preliminary budget of $38.1 million. That's an increase of $14.2 million. Now bear in mind that this does not include any increase for compensation yet. So I'm not going to show you that until after we've talked about compensation. So once we've had a nice long discussion on compensation, if we need to bring you an update, we'll bring these slides back to you with those numbers added in. So The biggest change we'll have from one year to the next is in food and supplies, because we're going to be feeding more kids. So that'll drive the bulk of the cost. We're expecting enrollment increase, more kids on campus. When you have free meals at this extent, you tend to have more kids participating in eating than you would if they had to pay. And that's a great thing. That means more kids are getting healthy meals. We'll also have a few more serving days. We did anticipate some inflation costs for food. As you know, we have to bid out our cost and order things, just like all of us going grocery shopping on the weekends. We still see those same inflation costs too, so we anticipate some inflation every year. When we combine our revenue and expenditures, we're forecasting a loss of $1.8 million for 2021, but we're also anticipating some pretty good news for 21-22. So we're expecting about a 3.9 increase to net fund balance next year. And one of the key things we've talked about over the years is that the feds do not like us to have more than 3 months of fund balance. So if we go over, they will require us to file a plan in which we define how we're going to lower fund balance. And if we do that too many years in a row, they'll just cut our reimbursement rates and make us go below 3 months. Bear in mind here, we have no compensation here. We're not overly concerned about, we're hanging around at 3 months, but we're not overly concerned about anything. This healthy fund balance has been great for us. So if that 3.8 was a negative instead of a positive, we'd still be in great shape next year because we have such a strong fund balance. The program's been strong for years, and that's why it's always one of my favorite things to talk about. Bear in mind that, not all districts have been as fortunate. There are a lot of districts in the state who have had to take money from their general fund to help offset the losses in their school nutrition programs. So we are very fortunate that our program is in the shape that it is in. And that, in a nutshell, is school nutrition.
So before questions, yes, that was me, sorry.
I was like, I don't know who made that noise.
Sorry. So we just wanted to go over some key takeaways, I guess, before we open up for questions. Increased property values do not increase overall M&O revenue. I think Mr. Moy was hammering on that. 2.5 limitation is on overall M&O tax collection, so homeowners may still see a tax increase greater than 2.5 if their home value increased, despite further compression of the tax rate. Still have a lot of unanswered questions regarding federal money. Several area districts have more access to revenue than we do. Teacher compensation at the beginning of the scale needs to be addressed. The debt service, we can lower the INS tax rate for the 7th year in a row and continue to pay down debt early. And school nutrition, feeding students for free next year. So if anything, this sheet, if you can take that with you and study it and look at it. But, on the 7th, like Ms. Lackhorn said, we'll be bringing compensation, some health insurance, and give you some more details. But with that, we can open it up for questions.
I do have one question. I just would like some clarification, and it was noted on 2 of the slides in regarding nutrition. It said enrollment increase and more students on campus. They were 2 bullet points. Are you saying those are 2 separate bullet points? We know that there'll be more returning in-person learning, but I thought our projection as far as enrollment was set to decrease.
Actually, it's set to go up about 1,100 to 1,200 over where we are today.
Based from, yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, I keep factoring in the 1920
Right,
loss.
because Ms. Winkley, what everybody needs
Yeah.
to keep in mind through this year is because of hold harmless, we held staffing harmless. Do you see?
Yep.
So even though we were, a little above 3,000 kids less, staffing stayed the same. So yes, we're showing an increase in enrollment, but there's still
We're still 5 short.
less than 6453.
Yeah.
Do you see?
Yeah, I see it.
And again,
Like 3 short, I
and
guess.
Mr. Moy did a great job of this, but I really, y'all, I so I worked with performance and planning for 2 years on projections. And on any given year, it's tough. But they do a great job, and really, they're always less than 1% off. This year is a challenge, y'all. Like, we just, I've listened to some school districts that added nothing back. They've added no kids coming back. Some are expected. I think, we've talked off and on extensively about this. I think your rural districts have a really good idea of who's coming in and coming back. The larger and the more urban or suburban areas are more challenged, because what we're starting to find now, so we call them the purple forms. I think, Ms. Winkley, you've talked about it with me. What we're finding is there have been a lot of kids that have been with us all year, but they're not here. They are in Houston, they are in Dallas, they have moved somewhere, they're out of state, and because of the way it was structured this year, we were able to keep them on the books. So now, we feel relatively good about adding kids back, because remember, the vast majority of the losses were at pre-K, K, and 1. So we're very hopeful that there'll be kids coming back because they were so low. So that's really where we're factoring in a little bit of growth.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I keep thinking of that, 4,000 loss from between 19 and 20. But part of that too, did we have to cut back on staff this past year with food services because of that drop from the 64 to 60?
I looked at Sharon
imagine-
to confirm, but no.
She
Ms.
said no.
Glosson, do you want to come and
Okay.
address that?
I mean, I would imagine they were making food and snacks around the clock. God bless them.
And you can tell by our expenditure slide that the payroll costs weren't growing as much as those food costs. And that's because we've been able to maintain that staffing level as much as we can. But Ms. Clausen.
Yeah, we weren't cutting any positions, but we also saw a decrease in applicants for our open positions, and we also had quite a few resignations because parents may have wanted to stay home with their virtual learners, and so we did have quite a bit of turnover, and we weren't able to fill the positions, but we're looking to fill those positions.
Good, very good. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Huey?
Back to the ESSER funds, and I was aware of the 40% thing that's been discussed. But there, from what I tried to understand on it, and I'll be the first to admit, I cannot follow every single day of the dances that they're doing there. They're talking about it must go to fund balance, but at the same time, fund balance has been a huge target this session too. I mean, like a major bullseye.
So I'll start and then turn it over. So, two things. Dan Huberty's fund balance bill died an ugly death. Now, second, part of that amendment would be to direct the commissioner to rewrite schools first so that nothing related to this forced fund balance would do anything to change your school first ratings, whatever that means. But again, it's just more and more change to commissioner rule. I'll turn it over.
Kind of makes you scratch your head, doesn't it? Yeah. See, and so that's what makes us a little nervous. Is you go from a discussion over you have far too much fund balance as school districts, you should be spending it, to, you know what, we think you should put 40% in. So it kind of makes you wonder what's their long game here, right? It could be that they want to do that so in a few sessions from now they cut us. You don't know. It's just we're all very hesitant over that piece about mandating that we put money away, because you kind of got to wonder why they want you to do that. They never want you to do that.
The line that they're going to sell with this is, if I remember, I'm going to paraphrase what's in that amendment, is they're calling it for extended interventions. So they want to force us to do the programs, like the ESSER 3 funds under the American Rescue Plan Act require us to do evidence-based intervention strategies to pull the kids back up to grade level. And the way that they're framing that, if I remember correctly, is they just want us to extend that for more years.
And if they supplant, if they want us to supplant, then there's really no new monies. So in 2023 or 2024, if we're supposed to use ESSER dollars because we spent those and then we have more in general fund, like Dr. Micah said, are they going to cut us in 4 years? So really, we didn't get any real new funds. So that's the scary part, because a month ago when they said we were getting all this money, and then the commissioner in a talk says, hey guys, don't forget, maybe you need to extend it or stretch it, and then all of a sudden there's a bill. It kind of gets you really, really nervous in that it just seems like they're we're gonna do our own supplanting for monies that we were supposed to use for remediation. So anyway.
And Ms. Caldwell, you'll remember my negative outlook on all of this.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I said when this whole thing started with ESSER dollars, my big fear all along was that the agency is going to start telling us how to intervene. And I want to remind everybody, there are no teachers at the agency. That literally, y'all, they are not an education provider. And slowly through this pandemic, they are starting to trickle in to tell us how to do it. And that's what I fear about this 40% and evidence-based, because they're going to dictate, I'm fearful that they're going to dictate how to intervene. Hold on there, Dan. And here's my problem with it. So if it works, the agency was great. If it fails, we did it. Do you see? That's how it'll play out. That somehow we didn't do it properly, right? So I don't know. I'm pretty torn on that. Mr. Villarreal,
No, I was just gonna
you may interrupt now.
Sorry. I can't see from back here. I have bad eyesight. I'm 20/80. I have 40% hearing loss or 60%. I'm not sure what the doctor said. But no, what I was going to say is it's kind of like the rainy day fund. Our fund balance is going to be their rainy day fund because if we have to drop everything to our general fund, and then in 4 years they tell us, so it's their rainy day fund, but we have it in our bank. So
Yeah.
that's it.
We all know supplant is their favorite method. Yeah. Too much history there.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's it, Miss. And you've been around for a while, right? You've seen
Couple
this
days,
play
yeah.
itself out over and over again. And that's the thing is, everybody's kind of looking back and looking at history going, boy, as a state, we have a long history of doing things that aren't good like that. And so that's what we're all hypercritical right now of really what is their game plan here.
Yeah. Thanks.
David, do you have any questions?
Yes, I've got a few questions. Some are somewhat general, but going for the general fund part of the discussion first, when we're talking about property value, we have the kind of the property makeup, and we have single family, commercial, multifamily, and then what would be an example of some of the things that are in the other category that makes up 7%?
Okay, believe it or not, we actually have like $2.7 billion worth of property that is totally exempt, not talking about the veterans exemption. Mm-hmm. All of our property is exempt. It's counted as a property value.
Got it.
Any city, county. And then also what's not in there, there's probably about $2 billion of commercial personal property. The 24% is only commercial real.
Got it.
And then there's there's little things here and there, industrial, cable companies, all these little categories that they have.
Okay. And we were talking about House Bill 3, and you were talking about the changes. I know you said that there's amendments and it's in the Senate and they may, whatever. Are there anything, from what we've seen so far, is there anything in there that one or two things that jump out saying, okay, we really need to keep an eye on what they're talking about these. I know we have to keep an eye on all of it, but is there anything in there that would cause some of this to really go?
So the actual
skewed.
cleanup pieces, the only thing that kept coming up with different districts was, right now there's one weight for career and technical education courses for those FTEs. They were gonna change it, so there's different levels of courses. There are 4 levels of courses for career tech. And what they want to do is start to take the earlier, less advanced courses and fund them. So right now the weight is like 1.35. They want to fund the first courses at like a 128, but fund the advanced courses at like a 141. And so we had a lot of people up in arms about that. We crunched the numbers. It made no difference. We're going to end up with the same amount of money.
Yeah.
I don't know if Deb knows of anything that she's hearing about 1525 on some of these other things that, like these 89 pages of amendments that she's heard may go through. But the base bill of 1525, the intended thing of just cleaning up House Bill 3, did really not affect us much. It affected small and mid-sized districts. There was some bad language that cut some of their career tech funding. So it's fixing that. It's fixing districts who had the fast growth allotment. We don't get the fast growth allotment. So the more and more I kept hearing about 1525, the more I'm like, really doesn't make a hill of beans difference to us.
Yeah, it did. It's not going to swing something
Yeah.
too drastically one way or the other.
Right.
Okay. For the projection on the student enrollment, I know we've talked about that a couple of times here already, but how exactly, I know we usually go on historical data, how did we do it this year to come up with a potential, 1,500 student increase? Or 1,000 student increase?
Blindly, no. So, no, we followed the same practice and process, but then really did a high, medium, and low approach. So we took the mid of what it would look like if we get majority of our kids back, if we get some of our kids back, and if we were at the bottom of that. So when I say blindly, jokingly, it's true, because we're hopeful that we're communicating with the public and inviting our kids back the right way, but we also run the risk that some kids won't return, and we didn't want to put ourselves in debt by saying that our volume goes extremely high, but we're prepared to open up jobs should we see more students return.
Yeah. Okay.
So is this the medium level then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mr. Byer, what they use is cohort modeling. So you take, and so we have historical data that shows cohorts as they move through.
Right.
And their kind of attrition rate or their add-on rates. Yeah. And so that's what they're always looking at, are these cohort models. This year, these things are so out of alignment with what you traditionally,
right.
Again, they're usually 0.2% off of projection. It's just so far off that it's when he says blindly, it's kind of like trying to go back to but not really, because you have to factor in some pandemic piece to it.
Right.
So we didn't go with, because there are people that think we're going to get more kids, and I really hope that happens. But we're just trying to, to quote Gary Sullivan, right? It's the Goldilocks theory. We're trying to find the right amount. Right. That's what we're going for. So, are we accurate? We'll see in the fall.
Right. Well, and we thought last year we
Right.
would be somewhere, and all of a sudden we can't find 3,000 kids. And so,
Right.
So, and one thing, so as, Dr. Micah mentioned earlier, the bulk of the loss was pre-K, K, and 1.
Right.
Well, it's not compulsory until grade 1. So what Alex Vardell and his group will do will look at birth rates 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years
See
ago,
what might
and
come.
compare that, historically those birth rates to new enrollments. And we know that those kids just didn't show up this time.
Sure.
So there's going to be some people who were born 5 years ago who didn't show up as a kindergartner, who's either going to show up as a kindergartner or first grader this year,
Yeah.
plus the fourth, the ones who were born 4 years ago who are going to show up brand new pre-K. So that's why we're, the Goldilocks areas, those first grades will see an increase.
An increase, right. Well, I guess that kind of transitions into some of the school nutrition discussion. I just want to make sure I'm clear. I know when we're only talking about a projection of, 1,000, a little over 1,000 students, but our new school nutrition funding is going up almost double, roughly, I guess, from 20 million up to 40 million, if I had that correctly.
Right.
And that accounts for more kids coming back from virtual to in-person. But that's also because we're doing free lunch for every school this time, right?
Which we're currently doing now.
I
but-
thought there were some that we were not. I guess I didn't realize we were doing all free lunches everywhere.
Nope. So, Sharon, if I'm saying anything incorrect, you jump in and save me. But they're all free now, but you've got just a very large portion of our students still remote. And so
Correct.
they're not accessing those meals at the level that the students who are on campus are accessing. So we've got
Right.
this big influx that we expect next year
Got it.
and a little bit of enrollment
And a
growth
little-
too.
okay.
So
So
when you
that's why
put
we're
all
doing
that
that.
together, that's a lot of money. And that 42 million in revenue for next year is a lot more in line with a normal year for us.
Right, when you were saying
Yeah.
30,
Yeah,
mid-30s or
37,
whatever, or high
it-
30s is
Yeah, it's
normal.
always been
Yeah.
we've been over 35 million for quite a few years now.
okay.
And so, and with just this free program, the reimbursement rates are really good.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna be a lot of money, as
So-
you could see.
So the
you know.
anomaly of what looks like a humongous increase is actually not
No.
from
yeah.
a normal year if you go
Right.
back historically.
Right, it looks more in line with a normal year
Normal
than
year.
the 2021 does. 2021 is really gonna be our outlier, and it's gonna irritate me for years, because we'll lose our historical trending
Yeah.
because of that year,
Got it.
you know.
Just like the chart here.
Well,
If you
that's
would've
what I was gonna
followed
say
that
with
blue
the
line,
students, yeah.
You could see where
Right.
if we just followed the normal trend of enrollment, we might still end up at 61,586 if there wasn't a pandemic this year.
Sure. And at a basic level, I guess, this is my third budget year, or third budget process. I guess I've never stopped to ask the question, how is the federal allotment allocated for each district, for the federal portion of the funds for school nutrition? Is
That's
it purely number
per
of
meal.
students? Okay,
Yeah.
per meal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's all based on, the National School Lunch Program, they have different reimbursement rates. So if you're free, they've got a reimbursement rate for free. If you're reduced, there's a different reimbursement rate there. And
Right.
if you're paid, we still get a few reimbursements there too. And so the summer feeding program is actually one rate per meal.
Right.
But that's how it's calculated.
Okay.
It's not an allocation based off of your number of
Just-
students. It's all per meal.
Per meal, okay. And then the last thing I had, I know, and Dr. Mike, I'm not going to say this correctly, or there was an issue earlier this year about people filling out a survey about the free lunches at certain schools. I think it was with the Title I campuses potentially, and there was some confusion about people not responding to the survey, and we made a big push for about a week or two to really get people to respond to that. One, did we end up okay? I mean, considering the year we've had, did this past year end up okay? And two, are we going to make sure that we really alert people to that coming up for this coming year so that we don't lose out on money or funds somewhere?
So our total economically disadvantaged numbers when we finalized the submission to the state was very much in line with last year. However, we expected the number to be higher, considering, 11% unemployment and, hearing about all these people that had lost their jobs. So yes, so there was a push, and it got us really good, but we suspect that the real number of economically disadvantaged was slightly higher than the number of forms we got in.
Okay. And I know, and I guess thinking ahead, making sure that we're keeping track of that so that we can really make sure that people respond to that. Because I know at the beginning of every school year, there's a million forms and surveys and everything that go out, and some of those that are very critical, I don't think people necessarily realize what the impact could be to our district. So
Yes.
That's the one drawback to it's free. Because there's, in the past, what motivates people is it's not free, and so they take the time and they fill it out. with the government already saying it's all free meals next year, that's a concern for us already. So again, we will do a lot of things that we can to try to get folks to do the paperwork.
And there's different things that, working with MIS, Marcus Arola's folks, trying to get it more automated and then also trying to push out some more information. So we're working on things to try to make it as simple as possible, as easy as possible for our families. So I know he's probably going to get something out in the next few weeks. But at least if we start now, we can start trying to gather that. And like I said, just try to simplify it since people are starting to check in back with schools. So yes, sir, we're working on it, and hopefully the system we design will be user-friendly enough to where we can get people signed up. And we know at least what the floor should be.
Right.
So once we meet that floor, then we can start trying to chip away at anything higher.
Can increase it. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Dr. Mike, I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly because the audio's echoing a little bit. Did you say the current staffing this year for the teachers and specialists was based on the 65,000 students? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, this year's staffing was based at 64,000. So that is so when we were held harmless, we did not cut staff this year for this current year. That is what we're having. So, Mr. Hilliard, I know the other night when we were talking, you had asked about contracts. Are they the same? Not really, no. There is a reduction in staff, all right? So we're having to course correct between the 64,539 and the 61,586. So you will see that in a future presentation about the number of slots that we have cut.
Okay, and that's what I assume based on the campus staffing at one of the next meetings. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly because of the echo. Thank you very much.
Yes, that's what happened this year is because once they held us harmless, we just kept things in check.
We'll cover it more on June 7th. So the next time you'll get an update on campus staffing. But just to bear in mind that even with this change, we have a lot of attrition each year that will cover this. So that change isn't necessarily individuals losing jobs. That attrition will take care of that for us. Just a reminder.
Great. And is there any concern about having any certain types of specialists for, I know we have a certain number of special education at both ends of the spectrum, but getting some of those folks with unique skill sets and or support with this turnover and change for this next year? Or do we believe we have plenty of available qualified teachers and associates and staffing to fill all the requirements?
So Mr. Jarrett and I were just having this conversation the other night. We know attrition will cover the numbers, but you will still see job postings on our website because we still need the right people with the right certifications in the right areas. It's not, so if we say the total number of students should result in a reduction of teachers of this, well, it's maybe a bigger reduction of those that are retiring, resigning, but then adding back, hiring again on some of those others. Hopefully we just get to a net of the right number of teachers reduction for the savings.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anybody else have anything else? No? All right, awesome presentation. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought you were saying something. Yeah, and so it begins. This was a great budget study session number 1. Thank y'all, everyone, for being here. Adjourn at 7:22. Time of adjournment, item 13, 7:22.
It's item 8.
Yeah, item